Welcome into the official. Tonight, we have a great show for you, of course, and it's going to be a little bit different. So, we've been giving you names of players weeks after week after week, 3-star sleepers, high end guys, busts, all that stuff. And tonight, though, we're going to focus on just kind of a general discussion on what we've learned over the last 2 years doing this. Really, the third year. No, this is like the third class we're really working on is 2024. So, kind of 3 years into it. What have we learned? And some tips, maybe some tricks that we do that you can use to evaluate your own players, and just kind of have a little discussion here. So not as many player names. You're not going to get the sleepers like you might normally do, but we will kind of peel the curtain back and talk about the process. This is the official. All right, good evening. You'll notice I only have one co-host here. David, welcome in. Glad you could make it. And thoughts to Matt. I don't think he's got anything super serious going on, but couldn't make it tonight. Hope everything is going good. Glad you're here, David. We're ready to have a little conversation on things we've learned along the way.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a little 1v1 here, a little casual conversation, and just do a little info dumping, huh?
Little 1v1. I would rather be wide receiver in that case because they always win the 1v1. All right. Well, before we get started, real quick, got to shout out to Home Field. And tonight I actually have a Home Field shirt on. You'll see this is Slippery Rock. A storied actually football team back in way back in the day when college football started. I've always thought they were a cool name for a college, and they have this vintage looking shirt. So I got this one from Home Field. And they have teams like Slippery Rock all the way up to UGA and everybody in between. So go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. They've got these vintage soft shirts, pants, hoodies, hats, you name it. All the stuff you've got to look great for college football season coming up. And if you've never bought from them before, Campus 2 Canton is your promo code for 15% off your first purchase. So go check out Home Field Apparel and get yourself a Slippery Rock shirt or Colorado School of Mines or Hawaii, whatever you want. Also, of course, check out campus2canton.com. That is our parent website. And we've got all the tools and features that you need to really dominate, whether it's, betting on Saturday, Campus to Canton leagues, even NFL Dynasty leagues. All that content is there for you starting at $2.99 per month and working your way up from there, depending on what kind of package you want and what kind of bells and whistles that you'd like. So campus2canton.com. All right. Had to do my promos, but we're ready, David, to talk. And, this is supposed to be just a discussion. We're going to talk about things we've learned along the way. And I said in the intro, we've been doing this. This is, I think, our third full recruiting class in 2024 that I'd say we've really, evaluated with our process. And that process has changed over time. But one thing I wanted to lead off with is that, at the end of the day, we get excited about 3-stars and sleepers and everything. But at the end of the day, college football is top heavy. And I went through Campus to Canton's top 10 C2C players at each position. So quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. So I guess 4 positions there. And so out of 40 players that I looked at, 17 were from 5 schools. Now there's 68 schools in Power 5. So 17 of the 40, which is approaching 50% of the top players, were from only 5 out of 68 schools. That's only 7% of Power 5. That's Ohio State, Texas, Clemson, Michigan, UGA. Does that ring a bell for you? Does that sound right? Or is that even a little bit shocking that almost half of those 40 players are from 5 schools?
It's honestly more than I thought. I mean, I've seen some blue blood studies and stuff, and I knew it was pretty high, but yeah, even that seems like high.
Right. I mean, and this is only the offensive skill positions. This is only for fantasy. So it's a little bit different than saying, top NFL prospects or things like that for an entire position group. But, for our purposes, at the end of the day, the blue bloods still went out. I think I already mentioned it, but Ohio State, Texas, Clemson, Michigan, UGA. Those are all absolute stud programs. 3 of those 4 made the playoff last year. Clemson's won a national title and been to the playoff multiple times in the last 10 years. And then Texas is Texas. I mean, it's the flagship school and the best state for recruiting. So they're always going to have talent. Not as much win-loss success lately. But those teams don't surprise, And so Ohio State having 5, they've got 2 receivers, 2 quarterbacks in the top 10, and a running back. They're just recruiting offense like crazy. So, I think the point of this is that despite the fact that we love to look at the G5, we love to do all this stuff with 3 stars because I do think there's value there. But at the end of the day, Ty should go to a blue blood program. And we should not fade guys, with no really good reason going to these schools. And I'm talking to myself here. I mean, I faded like Brandon Innes a little bit this past year, going to Ohio State. I might look back on that and say I was so dumb. But, when the tape doesn't always wow you, sometimes you probably just need to Carnell Tate's one. He's already popping over to Ohio State, and I don't think we really liked him that much. But he's already lost his black stripe. He's blowing people away in practice and already looking like, the next guy after Marvin Harrison. So we should probably trust those evaluators as well. And that's kind of what I take from that.
And I'm kind of embarrassed to say, I thought, I had Carnell Tate as my wide receiver 10, and that was me hedging a little bit. And apparently he's just
a 10.
Yeah, apparently he has the highest football IQ in the history of the world, because that's all I say with these practice reports and stuff. He never makes the same mistake twice and all that stuff. So it's that's definitely a part of the scouting process I need to get better at, is trying to figure out, who's got the football IQ and stuff like that. Because his physical ability and his athletic traits are they're good, but they don't jump out at me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a good segue. Honestly, I wanted to bring that up at the top of the show, just to say that no matter what, I need to even remind myself, look, Ty goes to Ohio State, Texas, Clemson, all these stud schools, but you bring up football IQ, and I think that's one thing we are not great at knowing much about. We can watch the film. We've got all these peripheral metrics, things that you and Matt have worked on, various models, digging into, the strength of schedule for these teams that they're playing on and market share, all this stuff. At the end of the day, though, it's really hard to know how a guy is going to transition to a very large upgrade in talent and competition. And so, whether it's mental fortitude, whether it's work ethic, whether it's football IQ, those are very hard. And you were telling me, in front of the show, I think it's worth our listeners to kind of understand. You and Matt are kind of trying to work on that a little bit. What are you guys doing on that front?
Yeah, we obviously agree that intangibles matter. I think we all know that. The person itself, it matters. Their story matters. So I think we've been I'll just say the first year I came on pretty late in the process in the 2022 recruiting class. And for me, it was just all right, let me just check these highlights real quick, pop a grade on there. And I'd kind of roll with that. And then the second year I was all right, what else can we do? Let's start looking at production. So we have all these crazy production metrics, and we get somewhat of a signal for quarterback. It's really brutal. Matt had been grinding so hard. I call it the R squared grind, and he got it up to 0.13. And it's just I don't know. It's just not super high of a signal there. But for running backs, fantasy points per game, that gives us a pretty good signal. But even then, it's kind of weak. So it's okay, that was year 2 is basically looking at tape and production. And now this year, it's those 2 things plus we're trying to figure out, basically comb through any interview we can find, any articles we can find, just all this stuff. And we're just adding to a player journal basically. And we're trying to any tidbits, any quotes that are interesting to us. Maybe we find some red flags, stuff like that. In retrospect, there was some on Chris Marshall. Just I don't want to dog a guy on here or whatever and talk bad about an 18-year-old, but there were actually some like red flags with Chris Marshall as well. But like just trying to figure out just the player in general, like and I'm talking like small stuff too, like when did they start playing football? Are they late to the game? Did they transition over? So are they like, are they showing enough promise relative to how long they've been playing? It's stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting things to figure out and just really get an understanding of the player overall.
I think you bring up, these are great points, and it is next level. And I love that you and Matt are always like cooking up things in the kitchen back there. But I agree that like tape can go so far, but we as evaluators on this side of the screen, if you will, we don't get access to these players. We don't really know, and it's very difficult. These college teams, they spend time with these guys. They have relationships with these players for like a year or more. A lot of times it's probably 2 years worth of relationship, and so they know these players really well, and we don't get to know them. But I think that it's not a bad idea to just like, if we can even get a slight idea of IQ, even what coaches say about them, or what their own high school coaches are saying about them, or their 7-on-7 coach or whatever. Like you said, Carnell Tate, like if we could have known, like, dude, I'm telling you, this guy is just like a savant when it comes to football. Do not bet against him. Like things like that would have helped, because we knew the athleticism wasn't blowing us away. And it kind of helps color in the lines here. I just, like you said, I don't want to write a guy off or say, we are not in the business of calling any players like, bad guys or anything like that. But it would help us if we could kind of identify players that might have a little bit of trouble, and not every story is the same. Some guys flip around high school to high school to high school, and there's very valid reasons. Some guys do it, and it's a little bit concerning. Especially the fact that in college, you can also do that. And usually guys who transfer multiple places in college, they are not ending up in the NFL. I mean, it's just, you look back, one-time transfers, okay, we've seen it happen, but it's just not really a recipe for success. Like the really good players stay, play their time, and go, other than quarterbacks, which, there's only one starter, so sometimes that can change. And I'm not even saying we haven't figured out, but I think we're just trying to think of other things, because it is an entire picture. These are human beings with multiple facets to their personality and multiple facets to who they are. And it's not just athleticism. And it would be way easier if it was, because we would just be like, all right, 22 miles an hour, great, lock and loaded. But those guys bust. And then we're like, why? How did they bust? So, I just want our listeners to understand that we're like doing our best, trying to look at every angle, leaving no stone unturned. And we don't think we haven't figured out yet, but just trying to be innovative and think about things. So you also mentioned a little bit of, did a guy, when did he start playing football? Was it last year? Because that could mean there's a lot of upside. Has he been playing only football since he was 5 years old? Maybe he's a fully developed prospect by this point. So talk to me about that trajectory of a player, what it means to you. And then, what do you think about like multi-sport guys? Is that anything that you're, really weighing these days differently than maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, these are things that definitely add to the story. I was actually looking at like some profiles from like former like NFL quarterbacks that were successful. Like for instance, like Ben Roethlisberger, he actually didn't start playing quarterback until his senior year in high school. Wow. And then of course he went the G5 route and ends up winning, multiple Super Bowls. But he was actually there's just this like these weird parts of the story where he actually started out playing wide receiver because he was stuck behind the coach's kid who he just played his kid at quarterback, So it's just like there's these weird development. So then he gets overlooked, So but yeah, we can talk about the multi-sport thing. Just on the top of my head, it's funny because like there's guys that you don't think, like these NFL quarterbacks are way more athletic than I thought. Like I'm talking guys like Tony Romo. You don't think of him as like like any sort of crazy athlete. We're talking about a guy that in high school, he played baseball. He was like a real good golfer. He's like a scratch golfer. He played on the tennis team. He played on the basketball team. He actually broke the record for most points at his high school. So it's like he's like performing at a high rate, like performing really well in multiple sports. He's just good at everything. I mean, same could be said for like Sam Bradford, a guy. He's just like, you know what I mean? He went one overall, right? But even in the NFL, he was just kind of like a lot of it was injury based, but he was kind of like a middle of the pack starter. But like this guy's just another scratch golfer, played hockey. He was like a super high level hockey player. Apparently, some of his coaches, they thought that he could go pro in hockey.
Wow.
I don't know. He also played baseball too, I think. So I think that there could be something there at least. I think that we want the best athletes. And I don't think that you don't find the best athletes, I feel like, with all these traditional testing things like 40s and vertical jumps and all that. It's like, I like looking at guys that can just play, that are kind of a natural in everything they do and are good at kind of everything they do. So that is something I'm looking at, is multi-sport guys. Because there was a tweet from Tracking Football. I kind of came across it randomly recently, and I think it was from the 2022 draft, that 90% of drafted players were multi-sport athletes in high school. So, I mean, at the very least, you know they're going to be competing
right?
in track. That's like the most common thing. At the very least, it's interesting because like a lot of the fast guys do track because they're fast, but a lot of the slow guys just avoid it, I feel like, even though they should probably be doing it to like try to improve their speed. But so I think that's something to look at. And I guess my other theory on that was basically, you know, if you're doing all sorts of different sports, you're not spending so much time on football. But if you're already like highly ranked or relatively highly ranked, and you're still like, and given you've only spent so much time playing football, like that's pretty impressive. So maybe there's like maybe we can project more and assume there's going to be more development down the road. So it's just a lot of theories. I don't really have answers for. It's just that's kind of how I operate, just theoretically, and I'm just trying things and thinking about things as much as possible to try to understand these players.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense that if a guy has not only focused on football and then gets to a point either in college, or most of the time it's going to be college, occasionally in the NFL, where it's only one sport. I mean, it's theoretically plausible they have a higher upside because there's untapped things there. Um, I also am totally with you on the multi-sport thing because, we talk about athleticism because it's something we can measure, and it's better to have it than to not have it. And we do concern ourselves with that in this space for recruiting, especially. But you and I have talked, and Matt, we've talked about, we send each other these weird tweets. There's so many things that come out about Patrick Mahomes and how of just a freak of nature he is in so many ways. We've sent tweets about some video about like the curvature of his spine or the ability of his spinal cord to twist. We've talked about his curvilinear motion, like he's faster in a half circle than he is in a straight line. Weird things like that about Patrick Mahomes that allow him to do transcendent things on a football field. And that's just being good at, like, if you are good at some of those weird things that I've just mentioned, you're probably going to be good at everything. You pair that with instincts, just general sports instincts, the ability to read a situation in a split second and make a decision in that split second as well. That's going to be good for all sports: basketball, baseball, football, whatever. Body control, all that kind of stuff that's very hard to measure in like a 40 time, or even miles per hour. A lot of guys can run fast in a straight line. But instinct, the ability to read a situation and react to that situation with body control, is something you're probably not going to be able to measure in any test. But potentially a surrogate for that is just being really good at everything, because it's probably a lot of instinct and just natural ability to have that body control to read and react and make a good decision in just fractions of a second. That's totally hypothesizing, but I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, I think it's a surrogate a little bit for maybe intangibles, a surrogate a little bit for, just overall body makeup and composition, which is something that like we have a really hard time measuring. I mean, even if we had a full medical exam, it'd be hard to measure it. Like the best of the best, which is are what we're looking for, is just sometimes unicorns. And Patrick Mahomes is, and he was a 3-star. Like, I'm not sure we could have figured it out. I've gone back and watched his high school tape, and I'm like, what?
I want to say that I would have figured it out. I don't know. He was okay. So he was like a super high level baseball player. And that's another interesting thing to think about at quarterbacks, because I feel like they're more natural and throwing from different like angles and like, sidearm stuff like that. Yeah. But something I came across recently, I didn't actually know this. Mahomes didn't start playing football until his junior year in high school.
And there you go.
He was completely focused on baseball. He wanted to be in the MLB. He flips over. He was convinced to play football as a junior. And if you go look at his tape, a lot of it's like off script. The arm talent is obvious. His numbers were he had monster numbers. Like it would actually.
Yeah, I mean, those are all things that like we would have figured it out.
I know. So this guy just steps on the field and just puts up monster numbers in Texas, and I'm saying his numbers would have dwarfed like anybody in this current class. I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
So it's just like those things are like, all right, this guy's just starting to play football and he's already dominating. Like, what could he be? Well, apparently one of the best of all time. I don't know. So it's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not going to say I would have figured it out. I would have said.
I think like he would have made our 3-star list. It sounds like I've gone back and watched the tape. You're right. I mean, the rocket of the arm, that throwing motion that's just very quick and from multiple angles, it is evident. Obviously, hindsight's a little bit easier, but it is evident. You can see it there. All right, then I wanted to also run down a few things that we've talked about. Just but you never know when it's someone's first show or someone that forgets or hasn't listened to us in a while. A couple of things that I could rattle off. I mean, number one, you mentioned QBs being good athletes, guys that you may not even have expected. So what's the QB rushing market share that we shoot for? Something that you kind of came up with. It's been a working theory for a few years, but I don't think it's really let us down yet. What's that number that you're looking for in high school?
Yeah, it's an arbitrary number. It's 10%. And this isn't talking about like college performance. There's plenty of good quarterbacks in college that didn't hit 10% in high school, but it's mostly like there aren't any good NFL starters that didn't hit 10%. So like the biggest thing right now that we're going to be tested on is CJ Stroud, because I think he topped out at like 8.9 or something like that. Like he's obviously
and he was
close.
Atrocious runner in college. I mean, he was negative 80 yards in 1 year. I mean, just like he didn't run, and he's not a runner, and it's fine. But he didn't run in high school either. So yeah, that'll be a nice litmus test. And we kind of reverse engineered that. You looked at all the NFL guys. You're like, none of these guys had under 10%, in high school. Doesn't mean anything. So we kind of we already took the guys who made it that far and reverse engineered it. We'll see if it holds true, or maybe CJ Stroud is a unicorn. I guess we'll see. One thing that I have learned a little bit working with you guys and just over the years is that like the length of a throw is not really telling you that much about arm strength. A lot of times we get excited when guys, bombs it 60 yards downfield, but it's a rainbow ball. And, frankly, there's a lot of guys that can do that, especially when you're talking about, college and then onto NFL. Like every guy can throw it 60 yards. It's more of velocity to like cross field. And Felix has mentioned this. I know we've all talked about it, but like cross hash outs, deep outs are really one of the throws you can really tell. Anticipation and velocity on those deep outs, that's an NFL type throw. And if guys are doing that, especially kind of with ease at the high school level, I think it's something that's kind of how I measure arm strength. It's not just like the bombs away, which I think many people still kind of look at that and just like, wow, he threw it really far. Then there's some easy stuff. I'm not going to put a running back very high up. This class might be different because I think this class is fairly weak. But in general, 221 miles per hour. I want at least those two in high school to get really excited about potential NFL upside. Now, I know we've talked about like 230 and 21.5. That's a different category of player altogether. That's like elite, but at least 200 and hit 21. I mean, are you under 21? I mean, is that like, I know it's at some point you do have to have an arbitrary cutoff, and we're not saying 20.9 is impossible, but like when you start getting guys into the low 20s, you almost write them off like 20.2 as a max speed at running back at least.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like completely write somebody off, but so we actually have a 40. Matt has like a 40 calculator that he put together so that people will have a better understanding of what this means. But like I think generally speaking, for a 200-pound player that runs 21 miles per hour, he should run around a 4.5 or less, and that's kind of. I know people always make fun of the speed score zealots and stuff when it comes to running back, but like we definitely like it's relatively important, I feel like, and it's a good starting point, especially for guys to get on the field pretty early. At least we saw that in the last class.
Yeah,
like, that's just generally where it was. But and we just know that size matters for running. Like, there's no, I don't know. I wish there was a way around it, but like BMI and size and all that stuff, it's everything. I take everything by a case basis, I suppose. But I do, and that's always at the forefront of my mind. I'm always thinking about those things.
I think for running back, and we'll talk about receiver here in a minute, but I mean, I think for running back, it is a little bit of an easier position to evaluate because there are some pretty clear thresholds that you can rule out a lot of guys. And, you know, when we're talking about the high end, we're talking about recruiting, we're talking about the first 2 or 3 rounds of your freshman draft, I'm shooting for NFL upside. Now, at some point, you just start saying, look, I'll take college production, I don't care. But like the really blue chip guys, you do want that NFL upside. And so I have a hard time, you know, even if a guy's super duper fast and whatever, if he's, you know, 185 going into college, 190 even. And that's the other thing I think I learned is like, you can't really dream on a 25, 30 pound increase in college. I think Chris Moxley may have looked at it, but like the average is right around 10. I mean, 10 pounds. So that means you got to enter college at 200 to get to 210. Because they shed some weight, they add muscle, but like it's a net plus 10 or so. It's not like you can dream on like, oh, he entered at 185, but I'm sure he'll be 210 by the time it's all said and done. Like that's just probably not going to happen. And so I do want at least 200. And then the other thing I'll say for myself is I think I might overvalue receiving at running back. I mean, it's really nice when these guys line up out wide and they show us the receiving skills. But, you know, again, if they're like 185, 200, 190 pounds, it doesn't matter. I mean, they'd have to be so elite at that, and which I don't think is something we can really judge how we're doing it, like truly elite, you know, to make up for it. So I think I probably need to pump the brakes a little on receiving and just really judge a great running back. And then if they show some receiving chops, then yeah, I mean, bonus. But like some guys catch some passes, even if they're not elite receivers. So that's something that I'm working on myself to maybe not overvalue that so much. And then wide receivers. How about this? I mean, Matt's screen name is big wide receiver guy. I think we all used to want the next Calvin Johnson, 6'4", 235 pounds. First of all, those are super duper rare. And second of all, they're very, very rare who are actually good athletes. So have you come down a little bit on what size that you're worried about for receiver?
Yeah, I've definitely come down on that. Those are the guys that definitely used to trap me quite a bit. They probably still will, honestly. They still like, I'm fully expecting to get trapped by like Cordell Russell. I'm just hoping that I'm hoping that he's like freaky enough to like, you have to be in the NFL, you have to be super skilled to like be successful at receiver. There's just like a small percentage that can just be so freaky that they can get away with not being like a great, like Des Bryant is the guy comes to mind. It wasn't like, I don't remember him being like a great route runner. He's just like a super freak. It's just like, there's just not many of those types of guys. And so part of me is hoping that Cordell Russell is freaky enough to like, if he doesn't develop as a route runner, that he could eventually make it. But at the same time, like, please develop as a route runner. But yeah, I think we're looking more like the game is more spread out. Everything's in small spaces. We're looking for little, like, smaller guys seem to be doing a little bit better, and I kind of like mid-sized guys a little more that have good change of direction and quickness, short area quickness. So that's kind of where I've been leaning in general.
Yeah, and I think like my cutoff personally is like I would like around 6 feet, but like 6 feet 180, 6 feet 185 is just fine. I'm not necessarily needing much over 6 feet. When you start getting under 6 feet, especially listed, like 5'11" listed might actually show up as 5'9.5". You start getting the smaller. So I think I listed, which you're probably getting the, a little extra. I think about 6 feet 180 is kind of where I start getting excited. Then lighter than that or shorter than that. Not like I'm going to write a guy off, but that's kind of my ideal. Whereas probably 3 years ago, I would have been like, I'm looking for 6'2", 210. So that's that's changed quite a bit just for me. Well, I see the time here. We could probably keep just chatting for a while, but we're coming up on half hour. Want to hit a couple commitments here. But I think that was a good discussion, and hopefully our listeners took some stuff from it. And can work it into their own evaluations, and drop some comments there at the bottom if you agree or don't agree with what we said down in the YouTube comments there. All right, so the biggest guy I think to commit is Nate Frazier. We've talked about him quite a bit. Running back out of California, committing to UGA, coming all the way across the country to go to the best team in the country. Matt just like writes guys off and goes to UGA because the depth chart's so much. I think he potentially fills a unique role as a smaller. Well, he's not even that small, right? He's like 210, 215 now. So I don't know. I don't know what to think of this.
Yeah, I think for the CFF side, it's frustrating. I thought that he would go somewhere. I was hoping he'd go somewhere else that's not so stacked. But like we just talked about it, like you want these blue blood players so basically you just stash him and then he'll have his turn and probably be in a conveni most of the time. But then he has a 3-down skill set, and this class is relatively weak. Like, so I can't just tank him.
You can't, because who else are you going to even put above him? Is the thing.
No, and we have to prioritize NFL guys. I think he's an NFL guy. I feel way better about his profile than a lot of other guys. So it's just like, he's going to make my tier 2. Like, I had to do this with like Richard Young last year. I like Richard Young. I like Haynes a little more. Going to Bama, they always get all these good running backs. So it's just like, he's probably not going to have tons of production in college, but I still feel like he'll make his way into the NFL and maybe he becomes a starter at some point. So yeah, nothing I can really do except for I might move him down a little bit, because ideally I can get a guy that produces on the college side and the NFL side. So maybe I will tick him down a bit, but he's still going to stay pretty high.
Yeah, Georgia's got Chauncey Bowens, who's a 3-star, but people seem to think he's athletic for size. And then Nate Frazier, and they also have Dwight Phillips, who I think is going to wind up kind of a running back gadgety type player. He's only 170 pounds. So kind of 3 running back-ish players in this class. Roderick Robinson last year, tough spot, but they'll probably feed 3 backs like they have been, to be honest with you. And I agree, you're going to get some production. Then with injury, maybe you get a couple games where he's an easy starter in college. But ultimately, that NFL upside is there. Then we've got Gatlin Bear. We've talked about him, I think last episode maybe. He did commit to Boise State, and we'll check back in a few years with Gatlin Bear. Super athletic. But we'll see, what he looks like when he takes the field in 2025, maybe 2026. Of course, we have to talk about, speaking of blue chips, which Alabama has kind of slid a little bit down the range. We got to talk about Amari Jefferson, a wide receiver, one of these bigger guys, 6 feet 200 listed. And he kind of looks it on tape. Plays for an extremely small school in Chattanooga, I think a small private school. What do you think about Amari Jefferson going to Alabama, getting that that sweet Alabama commitment?
Yeah, it's another blue blood. I think that, listen, like Bama, they also want depth too. So it's like not every guy they get is going to be a stud, and I think he's got good size. He's a good athlete. He's like a high level baseball player as well.
You love that?
he's like a yak guy to me. I haven't watched him a bit, but I just remember just thinking like, okay, he's just basically a yak guy, which is good. I mean, it's good to have yak, but he didn't seem very well rounded to me. And I don't know, Bama. He's kind of in that same bucket as like Rico Scott from. He's also in this class, and then Jaron Hamilton of last year. It's like I kind of like these guys, but like you have to be really good to like really stand out at Bama. So it's like.
Mm-hmm.
As far as CFF production, I don't know, but since he's going to Bama, like, yeah, I could see him getting drafted at some point. So it's
Well, and a yak guy at 200 pounds is nice. A lot of the bigger guys are often not additionally yak guys, and I refreshed my memory a little bit with him. He does have some, some acceleration. He's got some pretty nice moves with the ball in his hand. Kind of an interesting player. It's tough though. I mean, super small school in Chattanooga. Just the competition bad, but he had like Georgia offer, Bama, Tennessee, Penn State. I mean, all your best schools were after this guy. So I'm going to have to relook at him again. And then finally, I think a guy worth talking about is Frankie Arthur. I think he's he's like a top 15 running back for me in this class, going to UCF, who's really quietly putting together a very, very nice class, probably their best ever. I think that would maybe be easily. Gus Malzahn is getting it done over there. And so I think that he's their second running back in the class. I think they have Stacey Gage as well, who I really don't think is going to do a whole lot. So Frankie Arthur's kind of interesting. I already liked him. And I mean, for CFF, I think he could be a guy who gets in the mix pretty quickly. And they have Jordan McDonald, who we liked last year, already on campus, who was kind of a size speed guy at the G5 level, although now they are Big 12. Any other thoughts on Frankie Arthur?
Yeah, the landing spots. I mean, it's really good because, I think we initially talked about Stacey Gage on our 2024 look ahead, and he was like in the top 5 of running backs, and we're just like, I don't know.
What the heck?
I don't know why he's that high. Like, I think because he was at IMG at the time, so you just have to apparently you have to put him in the top 5. But so I'm not really. I think he's better than him, and Malzahn, he plays fast, and they run the ball a lot. So that's what we want for production.
Yeah, and I think he's like hashtag actually good, based on his tape. He actually rated pretty high for me. So that'll be an interesting. And then I don't know how to, this will be another thing that we talk about, I think, over the next few years. How do we gauge this like new era of P5? I mean, is UCF still should be, is Cincinnati, Houston, are these G5s? Or do we really need to, kind of elevate them? And I think going back to what I said at the top of the hour, though, it's really not any P5. I mean, if you really want that like stamp of approval, it's the blue bloods. And then after that, you can do some deference to like technically P5, like your Vanderbilt or Maryland, schools like that, Vatech, UCF. But it's really, they're not producing NFL talent the way that like these other schools are. So I'm not sure it matters that much when you get down there if it's G5 or P5. But anyway, well, good discussion. David, thanks for joining. Hopefully we'll be back intact next week. I think we got a mock draft coming up sometime soon. And, we'll have some other good stuff on the docket. Good show. This has been The Official.